I decided to make a last-minute change to the lineup because the stars aligned enough for me to do a little three-part altitude series. This is the first of 3 episodes, and we'll start underwater with a scuba diver. Then we'll go up to the clouds with a skydiver, and after that we'll go above the clouds with an astronaut. I haven't decided if they'll release consecutively, but that's a rare heads up into what you can look forward to in the next few months on the podcast. However, let's talk about today. It's hard for me to believe that I've known today's guest Craig for over 30 years. During that time, we've both grown a bunch, and I've seen his passion for scuba diving grow. What I didn't know was how he was introduced to it and how it helped him in other parts of his life. I have to admit, this made me reconsider my view on trying it one day. Craig is at home underwater in part because of how it helps keep him grounded and centered when he's out of the water. Oh yeah, and beyond this podcast, he's got a new book out and it's a bestseller. We'll talk about that in here too. Enjoy the episode and share it with a friend if you like it. Thanks. Starting as we always do, I'm going to ask today's guest, Craig Robinson, to introduce himself. Craig, can you take it away?
You bet. Well, first and foremost, it's great to be here, and we've known each other for a long time. But I'll tell you, the way I would introduce myself today is really different than I would have, 30, 40 years ago. Today, I'm a student for life. I'm curious about the world, organizing my life around my happiness and the things that bring me joy. But years ago, I would have told you, hey, I went to MIT, I went to Harvard, I worked in real estate for 25 plus years, and then while I'm proud of that, and I've had some really, really cool professional roles leading national and global real estate businesses, the things that I do today, I really think define the season of life. I'm a professor at an adjunct at Emory. I advise and coach leaders, and I'm author as of a few days ago on the book called The Happiness Reboot. So I'm really doing what you call a portfolio life.
And just to round out the picture, Craig, I know you when we met as an Atlanta guy who I didn't realize until I reached out for this that you had moved from New York, which is where I equated you with. Where are you now, and what's home base for you?
I'm in Atlanta now. All roads lead to Peachtree Street. Anybody who's been in Atlanta can get that joke. But I was in New York for 12 years, and I think a lot of people spend some part of their career, particularly if you're in professional services, trying to make it in New York. And in 12 years was a good time in my life, but it was also a season of my life that was really measured and centered around achievement and
Mm-hmm.
and trying to be successful in the corporate world. And New York is where I did that. But leaving New York after COVID was a way to affirm to myself and to the universe in some respects that I'm now solving for different things. And so moving back to Atlanta, be closer to family, to the communities I care about. I mean, heck, even just clean sidewalks and no yellow snow is a nice start. But Atlanta feels like a really safe place, both physically and emotional for me, and really a testament to what's important. But I'll tell you, just as an African American, Atlanta is a very unique city in ways that people don't realize. It's one of the only cities that really, since the Reconstruction era, has had three things consistently. And other cities have had some of these things from time to time. It has had a black political class, political currency. Even before we had representation, people don't realize that John Wesley Dobbs, who got 18,000 votes to get Mayor Hartsfield elected, in exchange we got Auburn Avenue and our first black firemen's department and police department. So we've always had political capital here, and that's been important. Number two, economic capital. So vibrant black middle class here, and it's diverse in terms of where people come into the middle class, and that's really, really important. And then the other thing is the social capital from HBCUs and churches and families. So when I think about the city that feels good to me right now is a city that has all three of those things and has had it for a long time.
Right. And in addition to being part of the Atlanta community, there's the other A that I have to mention because we've had so many guests from your fraternity on. Are you in a
Oh yeah.
fraternity, Craig?
Oh yes, the first collegiate fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Yeah, you grew up in Atlanta. You cannot not think about these organizations. Like everybody belongs to something. But yeah, it's been a big part of my coming of age and the community I belong to. I'm a part of a grad chapter here in Atlanta, and it's still a very important part of my life.
Craig, before we get into how we know each other, you mentioned that you're an author. Let's talk a little bit about the book. That's not what we're going to focus the podcast on, but it'd be crazy not to talk about it because it's been a
Yeah.
pretty exciting month or week for you. I believe the book just
Yeah,
came out.
this is week one. I'm a brand new neophyte author, never written a book. And if you told me 3 years ago that I was going to write a book, I would have said, nah, I don't think so. But it's been quite a journey and humbling. I felt and have passion around the focus of the book, which is really helping people to interrogate the scripts that we run oftentimes that don't lead to happiness. Oftentimes these scripts we're handed down by our parents, preachers, teachers, people we love and trust, who have best intentions, but a lot of times these scripts don't serve us, and it could be the choices we make professionally or in our relationships or in our faith. And so, the book is really about helping people unpack these scripts in search of their authentic truth and really in search of finding happiness, their own happiness, not my happiness, not
Right.
my scripts for happiness, but it really is a tool to help people really find their truth.
And are you sharing personal stories in the book or their worksheets? Like what's the
Yeah,
gist of
great
it? What would
question.
people be getting themselves into?
Well, listen, it's not just a memoir. I would say it's three parts. One part science research, people who have dedicated their entire life to understanding the philosophy, the sociology, the science of happiness. And then there's also kind of the lived experiences. Part of what I did a lot of when I was going through my own journey is just talking about the pain and my own struggle. And the more I talked about it, the more I realized I wasn't a snowflake. I'm no
Right.
different. Many people are struggling with these same things. My editor encouraged me to bring my own story into it because it makes it more recognizable, and you're creating safe space for people to say, yeah, that's me too. That's one and two. And then the third is it needs to be practical. So
Mm-hmm.
there are frameworks
Mm-hmm.
and diagnostics and kind of tools that someone can use in their own safe space to say, okay, how does this apply to me? There are no right answers. They're just your answers. That's really the way the book was designed, and hopefully it'll be impactful to a lot of people.
Yeah, parts of that will resonate with different people for sure. I know the second one, hearing you describe it, stood out to me because I've sort of seen you online and we're obviously still in the same circles with a lot of the same friends. And
Hmm.
I knew you as CEO, board member, doing the things, being the boss in New York.
Yeah, yeah.
And here comes the book and a little bit of a reboot.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like if you could go back to your younger self, what conversation would you have? I tell folks there are kind of four seasons in your career. I use the metaphor of the game. The first is getting in the game. Oftentimes you need sponsors, you need people to help you get into these like coveted jobs and careers and sectors like consulting. The other is staying in the game. And listen, you get a job, but the attrition rate is really high for a lot of places, and so the role of mentors and that type of stuff. The third is winning the game. Okay, you got in, you stayed in, but you're not there to just stay. You got to win and grow and have a voice at the table and move up. But the season that I'm in now, which is the most powerful one, which is changing the game. The first three seasons, Keith, if you were looking at me from the outside, you would say Craig really blew through those. He did a great job. He got into real estate. He had a 10-year career and managed to have some pretty meaningful executive roles as CEO. But now I'll tell you the thing that matters to me mostly is how do I change the game? How do I make not only that industry, but how do I go back and talk to younger people about thinking about impact sooner,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And how do you move into a space not with just the assumption that I want to win, but that I want to make a difference. And that doesn't have to be the fourth season. That could be a season that you start as
Right.
soon as you can. And so, yeah, that's where we are.
Now, Craig, you mentioned there talking to younger people. You also mentioned what advice you would give your 18-year-old self, which leads me to the last question I like to ask at the beginning, which is how do we know each other? Because we go back over 30 years, which is crazy to
Oh my
me.
goodness. You knew me when I was not as lovable. I was this, hothead, arrogant freshman at MIT who, and you were the parental, kind of big brother knows best upperclassman. And we probably clashed a little bit in part because I just was who I was. And boy, does life humble you and change you. And the fact that you and I are having this conversation today, if I could go back to my freshman self and say, you know what, you're going to end up being really cool with this cat later on, and you guys are going to have a lot in common, and you're going to really share wisdom. I would
We
have never guessed.
we definitely butted heads, mostly because we were very much alike. I would say the people and I'm guessing some of our friends might listen to this, would all agree. Neither one of us was lacking in self confidence and
Yeah,
opinions, but we handled it. And the truth is, we have a lot of really good mutual friends, and we run in
yeah,
the same circles. And it's funny how you look back and say, "Man, I tell my team today when I do things, and they're like, whoa, like that was a lot." I was like, "No, this is the mellow me. You should have seen
yeah,
me 30
exactly.
years
Yeah,
ago. I'm way more
yeah.
chill now than I was back then."
I know the Keith 31 years ago. But listen, this is really one of the things that we didn't mention just in that little moment was that we had an opportunity to be in the same space again when we were both in grad school.
That's right.
And life had humbled me, and I had a better sense for who I was and what I could learn for just if I just sat still and listened and learned. And you coached me on how to crack the case for applying for jobs at Bain, which I never got, by the way, Keith. I never
Our
got an
loss.
offer from Bain,
Totally our
but
loss.
that's all right. It's not too late. But listen, that was a really cool season to just be there and just realize like there are people in my network that can help me and who know stuff and who can help me be a
Yeah.
better person. And I'll tell you, one of the things I talk about in my book, Keith, it's just many of the folks that you probably have worked with at Bain or I've worked with in my career, we had the golden child syndrome. And I know I did for certain. Let me just talk about me. I grew up as a kid who felt loved and seen and validated when I achieved, when I brought home all A's, when I got a trophy, when I won the oratory contest or got into MIT or whatever. And what you don't realize is that script is still running,
Yeah.
at 40 and 50, and you don't know how to see yourself as anything other than what you do and what you achieve. That is a horrible way to move through life, and it's also an unfulfilling way to move through life. But most of all, it really makes it difficult for you to form the connections and the meaningful relationships and connections that you need because you have to be vulnerable. You have to really be able to avail yourself to someone on a human level, not as this resume and bio. And it's not easy to shake that loose. This
Not
is a
at
big
all.
part of our identities, and sometimes you assume that you are where you are because of that, but you might be where you are in spite of that.
Craig, I want to get into the topic of the hour a little bit, which is scuba diving. And
Yes.
before we get into what's special about it, I want to understand what your first experience was with it. As someone who's been snorkeling in a lot of great places around the world, I admit I've never really seriously considered scuba diving. And I've been to all the places, minus maybe Australia, that people are like, "Oh, that's one of the best dive spots in the world." And I'm like, "Yeah, the water's clear. You can see everything fine from the surface. I'm totally fine up there." But let's talk about scuba. What was your first experience with it? Like, why did you decide to do this?
Listen, I was a swimmer. I was always comfortable in the water, but I watched so many sci-fi movies, Jaws, Piranha. Like I just love pain and torture that I would go watch these crazy movies and then pretend like I was not going to be horrified if I got into the ocean. And so it was not anything intuitive that I was going to do ever. But I'll tell you, it was in between jobs. I left a big role, and I was in this moment where I was reflecting on what I wanted to do next, and it wasn't just professionally. I was also kind of thinking about some of the stuff you and I talked about in terms of the book. And one of my good buddies who also went to MIT, he's a little younger than us, who was in his 30s at the time, found out that he had colorectal cancer. And it's not a disease that people generally expect to have a long lifespan after finding that they have it. And his name is Daniel Rodriguez. And Daniel was told by his doctors that he had two choices. One choice was to do this really, really invasive surgery that was going to remove a big part of his colon. And that for him was going to be really difficult. And I'll tell you why in a minute. The second option was he could just do a less invasive chemo and radiation treatment. And he would more or less be able to live his life, at least the way he had been, but it might not be a long life. That had a much, much higher probability of having a recurrence. Let me tell you a little bit about Dan. Dan went to MIT, majored in computer science, but he was not just a computer science guy. He's a jiu-jitsu instructor. He was a base jumper, so he'd jump out of airplanes and helicopters and with a wingsuit and fly through through mountains. He is an extreme sportsman. Instead of going and getting IKEA furniture and renting an apartment right out of college, he lived on a sailboat in LA for 3 or 4 years, doing computer programming at night and auditioning for movies. I just saw him as someone who did move through life very different. And so Dan, it should not surprise you, chose the latter. He chose to have potentially a shorter life, but a more full life by having the less invasive. So I said, Dan, why don't we go on a trip? I wanted to spend time with people like you,
Right.
people who are thinking about the world different, making different decisions. You live and think different than I do, and I want to learn more. So we went to Costa Rica. We climbed a volcano. We went river rafting. We did all these crazy things. And then Dan said on the whim, why don't we go scuba diving? And I was not planning to do that, but in the spirit of trying to connect and be humble and shake the etch a sketch, I did it, and I was not surprised. I was not expecting it, but I ended up loving it and was almost hooked from that point forward. And I owe Dan for that, for putting me out of my comfort zone and giving me opportunity to try something that I now love.
I want to ask you more about that, but I just want to go back to something you said there. What was it about where you were in life that made you want to be around people that move differently, as you said? Because that is outside of a comfort zone, and it's usually outside of the consideration set for people, where they say, you know what,
Yeah,
that person's really different. I should spend time with them. That's usually the opposite of what people do.
exactly. Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a scene in the movie Gladiator with Russell Crowe. It's one of my favorites. Anyone who's seen the movie, you'll know the scene where he is this champion gladiator. He goes into the Coliseum every single day. He kills lions. He kills people with battle axes. He's just this amazing fighter. But in his heart of heart, what he really wants to do is to go home and see his family and put his hand through the grain that he's raising on his farm. And it was a way to say that just because I can be a gladiator and just because these people see me as that, that doesn't mean that this is where I belong. And there was a point where in my career, I knew I was a gladiator and I had been in the Coliseum with other gladiators. But I knew if I was going to imagine a different life for myself, one that might be happier, more sustainable, more complete and fulfilled, that I was going to have to take myself out of the environment of people who expected me to go in and fight every day and come back with cuts and wounds. That's part of what you do. And I needed to go be around people who thought about life different. That in of itself was uncomfortable, but
Right.
it was a big part of saying there's scripts that I'm running. Unless I control alt delete and reboot this hard drive, I don't think I'm going to ever stop running them.
And when you finally did get in the water, we talked about this when we were preparing for this conversation. It sounds like you just instantly knew that this was something you needed in your life. And a lot of guests that we've had on have said that about their home. Like as soon as they tasted it, as soon as they did it, they were like, this is different and this is what I'm going to need going forward. Was that what it was like when you got in the water?
Oh, absolutely. It doesn't mean that it was easy. It doesn't mean that it was comfortable. None of those things. If someone is looking for love at first sight or first experience, to be like, I intuitively knew how to do the thing. Like I'm Neo and the Matrix and the bullets were all moving slowly. That's not what happened. But what happened was this immediate grounding, which I had never experienced before, this sense of flow. I want to just share just something for your listeners who may not be as familiar with scuba diving. It is one of the only experiences where the Homo sapien, which is by all accounts the apex being on planet Earth as of today. So there are very few spaces where you move where you don't feel in control or largely safe. And so we're just not used to putting ourselves in environments where that's not the case. In the water, in the ocean, it is massive. You are microscopic relative to the universe, and it immediately tells you that. It immediately tells you that. Scuba is an acronym that stands for self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. You can't breathe. So let's just start with the most basic things that like give forth life, oxygen. Number two, while you can hear, most things don't make noises in the ocean. And if by chance you happen to hear a dolphin or you happen to hear a whale, sound travels faster than light, so you won't even know where it's coming from. So your sound is not really useful, and most things don't make noise. Number three, you can't see very far. The ocean is vast. Even if you could see 60, 70 feet, a whale could be approaching you, and you might not even see it until they got right up on you, just because of the vastness of the ocean. You can't smell, you can't taste. Those both of those parts of your body are covered with a regulator and a mask, and they're useless anyway. And then you don't touch anything. And then the last thing is people are like, well, I'm not a great swimmer, I'm not a strong swimmer. Being in the ocean is more like being an astronaut than being a swimmer. It is much more about floating and buoyancy and being neutral than it is about swimming, which the side effect of that is you're slow. So you're not even fast. You can't smell, you can't taste, you can't hear anything, you can't see very far, and you can't breathe. Keith, tell me what other place on this planet could you be reduced to something that gives you the ability to be humble and submit to the universe, but most of all, just to ground yourself in a place that is very peaceful and very present. Last thing I'll just say about that, I would imagine, if you're in a hospital and your last breath, you'll listen to your heartbeat, you'll hear your breath, but that may not be when you want to notice your heartbeat and your breath for the first time. Every single time I go diving, I hear my life moving through my body and I'm very, very present. My monkey brain that's constantly thinking about things I got to do and stuff I got to return and blah, 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 blah. I had not been able to do that ever before. And the minute I could do that in that water, returning almost to an embryonic, almost like moving back into your mom's womb, it just silenced me, it grounded me, and it gave me a peace that I'd never seen before.
And Craig, how many dives have you done at this point? When did you do the trip with Dan, and how big a part of your life has this become?
Man, oh gosh, I've been doing this seriously for about 7 years now, and I've got about I stopped over 500 dives for sure. The first year when I got back from Costa Rica, I immediately was like, when can I go again? I did 50 dives that year alone, which is crazy. I mean, it's crazy. Like if you're an instructor or you do this for a living, then that's not a big deal. But for people who've got day jobs and lives and families, that's crazy. And then I told myself, I want to find a way to do this at least once a quarter. Every
Mm-hmm.
90 days, I want to find an excuse to be in the water because it was just so healing. And so I have. And I make a point to go diving at least once a quarter. At least once a quarter.
Craig, I want to get into what's special about scuba diving for you. We talked about the peace that it brings and the perspective on your role in the universe or your place in the universe, but what else is special to you about scuba diving?
Well, listen, one of the three key ingredients to fulfillment is community and connection. The
Mm-hmm.
first is purpose. Another one is growth and impact. But the important one is community. Believe it or not, there is a beauty in the community of people who share this passion and love for the ocean. And I'll tell you one of the cool things about the community, and I've gone diving in Asia, Southeast Asia, in the Caribbean, on the Pacific and Atlantic, all over the globe. One of the cool things is that you get on the boat, you don't know who's going to be on that boat with you, but you immediately connect.
Mm-hmm.
And no one talks about what they do for a living. No one talks about what their title is. No one talks about their home. None of these kind of superficial things. We all talk about what we're hoping to see in the ocean. What have you seen? We trade stories, campfire stories, and we all just immediately get excited about the experience we're going to have. And then there's just a connection. I know I've been on the boat and enjoyed fellowship with people who probably voted for different presidents than I have and who have different lived experiences and probably in many other spaces we'd never connect. And even if we did, we'd find that we'd have little in common. But when we get on this boat, you feel like you're really a part of a community that loves and wants to protect the same things you do. And so that's been really, really special. I'll tell you one of the other things, getting into scuba diving in my 40s, I had been, an executive and a division CEO a few times, but I had to go back to being a student.
Mm-hmm.
I had to go back to learning, having someone help me with my equipment, make sure it's right. Am I doing this right? I mean, like to just go back to being a student. And it really kind of democratizes a little bit of what you might otherwise see as a lot of hierarchy outside of that space. We're all kind of humble to the fact that this is still an important and serious thing you're doing, and there are risks. And you always have a dive buddy, someone who has your back and someone for whom they're counting on you to have their back. And no matter how many dives you've done, the ocean is bigger than you'll ever be able to imagine at any point in time. The minute you get comfortable and you assume you've seen it all and done it all is the minute you can get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's something very humbling, very democratic, and very kind of binding in terms of the community of people who do this.
Craig, a lot of our guests had mentioned the community aspect of their home, so it doesn't surprise me at all that brings people together. I mean, you basically get on a boat and go out and in some ways trust them with your life because if something goes wrong, they're the help. But in our prep, you also talked about an approach to scuba diving that creates unique opportunities to meet new animals and not just people, not human animals. I want to talk about that because you mentioned something called the liveaboard, which took me a minute, and then I Googled it and was like, oh, yeah, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah, well, the typical dive touristy experience is you go to a beach and you find a dive shop and they give you gear and you go off the shore. You either do a shore dive, which you walk into the ocean, or they have a little boat and they just take you off to
Right.
a nearby reef, but it's like 5-10 minutes away or something like that. And for the most part, that's a pretty controlled environment. But then there's this live aboard, which I did for my 50th birthday, which is you go and you're on a purpose built boat that does nothing but take divers to the middle of the ocean, far, far away from the shore, and you dive all day, every day. You wake up in the morning, you go diving, and then you come back and have breakfast, and you go diving. Then you come back and have lunch, and then you go diving. Then you come back and have a snack, you go diving. You come back and have dinner, go diving, and even a night dive. And you're doing it all day.
Wait,
Like this is not like
a night dive in the middle
oh,
of the ocean?
oh yeah, absolutely. You go down there with your torches, which are basically flashlights, and there are totally different species that kind of come out at night and eat at night. So you get a chance to experience the ocean. You could have gone dive in the exact same location and come back at nighttime and experience it totally different. And of course, there's a different level of vulnerability. But just to give you a sense of what it's like to be on this boat, because this is not like a cruise line or a luxury lot. I mean, yeah, it's basically a boat with a bunch of scuba equipment and rooms that are designed specifically to just house scuba divers, and you don't know who's going to be on that boat. You have no idea, and you're on that boat for a week, 2 weeks, depends. So I was in the Maldives on the boat for 10 days, and the people who were on that boat, I went by myself. I decided I was going to do this wusa, like my 50th. I want to just be in the universe and by myself. And I got to Maldives and got on the boat and met the other 20 people for the first time. My roommate was someone who flew in from Moscow. He's a 20-something-year-old from Russia. Would I have ever met him ever? No, probably not. But that was my roommate for the next week and a half. And I met people from all around the globe. It was like I said about this community. We were all in this boat to have these experiences. But part of what's cool about a liveaboard is it goes places where they're just not humans. Like you're going to a place where like they're just not, life is just not used to seeing people snorkeling and surfing. You're way, way far off from all of that. So you get a chance to just really go into an ecosystem that is kind of very pure, and you're the alien. You're showing up in a space and you're the weird thing there. This is not a touristy beachfront. This is the middle of the ocean. And it's beautiful. Really, really beautiful.
And being the alien, when we were talking about this, you sort of helped me make it real in terms of what the animal interactions are like by
Yeah.
taking that alien metaphor one step further. I want to get that on here because it
Yeah.
opened my eyes to what I had seen when I've gone into the jungle and on other safari type trips where we got
Mm-hmm.
pretty far off the beaten path. The way you described it, I was like, oh, that is kind of what I'm
Yeah.
experiencing.
Yeah. We don't realize how weird and odd we are because we look at Homo sapiens every single day. But there are creatures that have never seen a human before. And so I tell folks, imagine a flying saucer landed on your street. There's probably a bunch of people who would just run. They wouldn't even wait for the door of the flying saucer to open up. They would just run. And in fact, as soon as they saw the disc in the air, they would just start running,
Right.
right? Because this is scary. This is not going to end well. And then you have another group of people who would be curious and they pull out their cell phones and start recording and like, this is going to be some cool content. But they really would still keep their distance and just kind of be recording it. And you largely see that on Instagram. And then there's another smaller percentage of people who be like curious to go up and like, hey, where are you from, fella? And interact. Well, far fewer people would probably go up to the UFO and interact. And it's the exact same thing in the ocean. When you jump into the water, you're loud, you're noisy, you're making bubbles because the regulator you're breathing creates these bubbles. Very few things make noises, and you're making noises. And you're weird looking. You're the biggest fish. Like, there are very few things that are bigger than humans, except for like really, really big sharks and whales. But even when you are vertical in the water, a fish still sees you as much bigger. Even a shark would see you as kind of big. And so most of the things just run. Like as soon as you get in the water, you don't even see that they're gone. As soon as you splash, they're gone.
Right.
And then there's some that will keep their distance. You may not even see them, but they're aware of you, and they're just like, "What is this thing over here?" And then occasionally there's some things that will be curious enough to come up close to you. But this idea that people have in their mind that everything wants to eat you, most of the things are afraid of you. They're scared of you. They've never seen anything like you, and you're definitely not their food source. So anyone listening, you can rest assured that you are not fish food for 99% of the things there.
But Craig, let me ask you, the things that want to go talk to you, that third group, are those like fish or are they like whales and sharks and other things that are like enormous. I would imagine a whale wouldn't be very scared of you, and it would just be like, let me go check this out. Like an elephant. Like
Yeah,
elephants come by and check you out all the time.
yeah, that's true. And well, look, there's certain creatures that are territorial, right? And you would be advised not to go and put your hand in a hole inside of a reef. An eel could be in there, and now you've really
Mm-hmm.
created a danger for yourself and for the animal. And they may not be curious about you, but they would defend their territory and their
Sure.
environment. And there's some creatures that just can't see very well, and so sometimes the way that they try to figure out what you are is they try to get close to you. They might want to smell you, or in the case of a shark, sharks bite to kind of figure out what something is. And although they might not eat you, you would probably bleed out if you didn't get that addressed pretty quickly. But by and large, there are some things that are curious about who you are. Dolphins are really curious. I've been in the water and just being able to make eye contact with a dolphin that you can just sense. You can sense its intelligence, and as it comes near you, you don't understand what it's saying, but you know that it's saying something, or it's talking about you to the other dolphins in the pod. And those are some of the most amazing experiences I've had, with just when something's curious about what you are and who you are, and they want to play, or they want to find some way to learn about you. But I will also share with you, I have done some shark dives. I've done dives with tiger sharks and bull sharks, and these could be pretty aggressive if not in the controlled environment, if you're not, really comfortable with how to maintain, kind of a safe distance. And that's a scenario where you really have to respect what they're capable of doing, and be really mindful of that. Because if they're curious about what you are, that means you can get hurt. And a lot of times people who spearfish, or who do things that, over time, sharks can sometimes associate you with being a source of food. And it's not that they want to eat you, it's just that scuba divers sometimes spearfish, and sometimes they say, oh, last time I saw a scuba diver, they were, spearfishing, and I got a free meal off of that. And so, those that happens sometimes. But we have ways of dealing with that scenario when it does pop up.
Craig, I have one more question before we move to the next thing, and I'm just generally curious. When you've come across whales, are they generally peaceful and curious, or are they sort of totally dismissive and indifferent towards you? And then the other question along those lines is, have you seen orcas in the wild? Because they're sort of a one of those things that would terrify me.
Yeah, yeah. I've never seen an orca. I would tell you, they don't really hang out in the Caribbean tropics. They tend to be in different places. But man, I feel like you, Keith. One of the things that's really probably scary for humans, Homo sapiens, the thinking ape, is an animal that is maybe smarter than you are, and is able to see you in ways you probably don't even see yourself. Yeah, that orca is a therapist, right? Like, you see me. Yeah, that would be pretty scary. And I'll just say, like, there's never been a human that I know of that's ever been killed by an orca except for in captivity. So even our fear of them is a bit projected.
Right.
But I've never seen one. But I will tell you this: I have come across whale sharks, which are big whales. They can get up
Mm-hmm.
to 40 feet long, and I would tell you they're this gentle giant that just moves to the ocean. And they're almost kind of oblivious of your presence, and they just kind of, are there feeding, grazing, and sometimes they just move by you. I'll tell you one of my most amazing experiences that I had with the whale shark. I was in the Red Sea, and I had gone diving off of the coast of Israel, this little town called Eilat. And in that part of the Red Sea, you can see Jordan, you can see Egypt, and you can see Israel. And so it's a really interesting place. And for the first time ever in my life, I was in the ocean. There was no other diver. It's just me and my dive instructor. We jump in the water. It's beautiful. Red Sea is top five. Any diver would tell you it's top five destination. And we go down, and in the water, you have to just know that there's 360 degrees of things that could be happening around you at any point in time. You've got to look up, down, to the side, diagonal, everything. There's always something that could be happening. And so my scuba instructor grabbed my arm. He shook it violently. He's pointed down, and I had to squint because I didn't immediately see what he was telling me to look at. And then, like, within 3 seconds, this thing that was basically looked like a rock changed colors, and it started moving. It was an octopus, and this brown thing turned into this beautiful red and blue, like, ever morphing, beautiful piece of art. And I stared at it for what felt like 30 minutes. It could have been 30 seconds. And
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was connecting with a species that saw me and I saw it. And just as soon as I got lost in that, he grabbed my arm and shook it and said, "Look up." He didn't say look up, he just pointed up. And then there was this whale going right over me. And now keep in mind, remember I told you, you don't hear anything, you
Right.
can't see much unless you happen to be looking at it. And so the fact that this 40-foot creature could be like a few feet away from me and not even see it until he told me to look at it. And it was just curious about us, and it just came to check us out, and it just glided past us so softly and gently, and it just allowed us to see it as it saw us, and it was just this beautiful moment. And that happened, I don't know, 7 years ago, and I can remember it like it happened 7 hours ago. It's still so fresh in my mind, and those are the types of experiences you have only if you go scuba diving.
Craig, in your intro, you made scuba sound really personal for you. And I wanted to just push on that a little bit more. And what is it about scuba diving that's so special and personal for you in a way that maybe some other things haven't been or aren't?
That's a great question, Keith. Scuba diving is more than just a hobby or something you do on vacations. For me, it really has had an impact on how I show up in other aspects of my life. We began our chat talking about the golden child and how, sometimes our inner child is wrestling to be seen and validated and all that. And sometimes it just doesn't sound like a very attractive version of ourselves. But there's also a part of my inner child that's curious and bedazzled by like magic. And my inner child steps to the forefront when I'm in the ocean. I get a chance to just look up and say, wow, this is amazing. And it's coming from a really true and pure and authentic space and place that I haven't felt and seen that since I was a child. And so this really gives me an opportunity to like tap back into a really important part of who I am and was. But I'll tell you the thing that is not always obvious to people that shows up in the way I serve as a board director, in coaching and advising and working with CEOs, and just ultimately in my leadership. I have this saying that we should replace our conviction with curiosity. In today's world and discussions, we're showing up with conviction around everything. We have to be
Mm-hmm.
right, we have to be loud, we have to be assertive, we have to be strong. People take virtue in their conviction. It's a label, it's a badge of honor
Mm-hmm.
that I have conviction. And what I have found that the curiosity is a far more powerful voice in the boardroom, in the executive suite, in leadership. Someone who's curious about the problem, who's curious about the lived experiences of the people in the room. Someone who asks the right question allows everyone to learn versus the person who assumes that they have the right answer. And being in the ocean is a humbling exercise to remind yourself of the curiosity that you have. We know more about the moon than we do the bottom of the ocean. And so, regularly being reminded of how little we know, how small we are, is a piece of that I try to take into every other space that I'm in. When you met me as a freshman, I was loud, rowdy, and wrong. I had a lot of conviction when I knew the least. And this is the interesting thing about getting older is if you do it right, you actually realize you don't know anything. And I don't mean that from an ignorance perspective, but you just know that there are lots of different scenarios, lots of different ways. And the ocean is a powerful reminder of that.
Craig, I couldn't have said that any better. And I certainly feel the same way looking back at some of the things I might have done differently or I might have taken away different things from. I
Mm-hmm.
also wanted to, there's this curiosity piece, but there's also this piece about how do you push yourself to grow as a scuba diver?
Mm-hmm.
Do you try and literally just go deeper? Do you go to different places? Or are there things that you do to sort of continue leveling up and learning and growing as a scuba diver? Or do you just sort of learn it and then just go different places and do it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the science of scuba diving is really young. We are only just in the past 100 years, I mean, beginning to understand the effects of pressure on the body, how to go deep safely, recreational diving for the most part, which is what I do. You're only going to go, about 120 feet or so. And there are technical divers who can go hundreds of feet deep. One of my good friends, he's from Atlanta, ironically enough. All this landlocked cities where all these scuba divers come
Right.
from. He is now a dive officer at a research center in California. He helps research scientists who are doing experiments and searching for things. He helps them go down 700 feet and study parts of the ocean that we may never even experience, where there's different life and there's different things. But the equipment that you need for doing that, the safety precautions, is beyond my even comprehension.
Mm-hmm.
So there's technical aspects of diving. There are different places you can dive. Diving in a cave is a very, very different set of risk and things you have to be trained for. Diving in different kind of ocean conditions. I'm comfortable diving in wrecks and all of those types of things, but there are so many other situations which I'd have to be completely a novice. I'm a master scuba, so for anyone who is familiar with the dive hierarchy, which is not very hierarchical, this is 2 levels below dive instructor. But that's miles of distance between
Right.
someone who is responsible for someone else's life and training, and then the people who train them. So there's just so much more. But I'll tell you, I'm less interested in being technically good, which there's a part of just doing something long enough you get better at it. I want to stay a student for life. I want to continue to just the ocean, the earth is covered more by water than land, and I will die before I have a chance to see it all. I just can continue to just enjoy being humble and student and be dazzled, and get better at it each time, get more comfortable, bring more people along. But my goal is not to be a winner, not to be a type A achiever. My goal is just to experience as much joy as I can in this very beautiful experience.
Craig, I want to thank you for answering the call and coming on. As I mentioned, I was editing a different episode of somebody who is a skydiver, and I was like, you can't really skydive a little bit, kind of like you can with scuba diving, because you can snorkel and then decide to go further. And your name immediately popped into my head. Like, literally, I was like, why am I not talking to Craig? I'm not going to lie, that was a week ago, and you dropped everything during your book launch and made time for 2 calls, and I'm supremely grateful for that. So I want to thank you for coming on. And I want to ask for people listening, where can they learn more? Tell us about the book, the title, where to get it,
Yeah.
websites, all the good stuff. And I also know from following you that you're also an underwater photographer. So give us all
Yeah.
the details.
Well, let's start there because that's really what this whole discussion is really about. And by the way, thank you for giving me an opportunity to share something I love. One of the things that I'd love to do in life is just to have more people be curious about this, to try it out, not be afraid, and to experience the joy that I have, even if you just try it. It's one of the reasons why I created an Instagram page called Keep Going Deeper, and it's all about keep going deeper, push yourself, challenge yourself, but also it gave me a place to just share my scuba videos. And I would share just all of these little snippets with people who probably thought I was crazy, but they enjoyed seeing my videos of sharks and whales and fish and octopus. And it was a way to just bring it back. So if you are curious about seeing some of that, go to my Instagram page, Keep Going Deeper. And if you're interested in my book, where I talk about a lot of these principles and how I think about happiness and joy and living a life centered around that, the book is called The Happiness Reboot. You can find it on the Amazon, or you can go to my website, which is www.craigmrobinson.com. Craig, Craig, M as in Maurice, Robinson, Robinson, CraigMRobinson.com. And you can always follow me on LinkedIn. I'm available all the places. Reach out to me direct. I love talking and chatting and helping you in your scuba journey.
Awesome. Well, Craig, thanks for coming on today, and thanks for making the time. And congrats on the book. I heard it had a big opening.
Yeah, thank you. Bestseller, Amazon bestseller in our first week. So we're really excited. Hopefully we're reaching the masses and making a difference.
Thanks for listening to this episode of My Home is Special. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast to get future episodes automatically. You can go to myhomeisspecial.com to see the full project and sign up for email updates. Be sure to follow KBevPhoto on Instagram or go to kbevphoto.com to see what I'm snapping these days. There's a lot on both to explore. For now, this is Keith, aka KBev, signing off. Peace.